Colin is in Windsor. Colin, what would you like to ask Mick?
Good morning, James. Good morning, Mick. And Mick Lynch, fantastic work. I've been so impressed with what you've done over the last few months.
Thank you.
My question is, do you believe that British workers' rights will be enhanced or weakened by us leaving the EU?
Well, in terms of the most of the legislation that we've got that is not inherited from the EU, it's mainly the Working Time Directive, which we implemented as a 48-hour week, would you believe? So it's a very diluted version of what come. But it's up to the government at Westminster whether they want to change those laws. All of the laws that we had inside the EU are now written copied straight into British legislation. So if you want to change any of those laws for better or worse, you now have a sovereign right to do that. If you're in the EU, you can't. But if you take the last Corbyn manifesto, which I obviously support, it's likely that manifesto was illegal under the European Union because you cannot go to public ownership of the leading parts of the economy, the railways, energy and the rest of it.
What have they just done in France with EDF?
Well, they've used an emergency power to cap it. The EDF was already...
But within the bounds of EU legislation.
Yeah, they have. But if you they haven't got round to the energy. The fourth railway package that was brought in by the EU means that all railway services have to be subject to privatisation. And they're doing that in France, Germany, Italy and Spain right now.
So there is more wiggle room than perhaps some of your arguments allowed.
There may be wiggle room, but the French and Germans tend to interpret what they do more liberally than we do.
Yeah, but they're members of the same institution. So
yeah,
the RMT's position is driven, because a lot of people are very interested in this. It's driven by the conviction that you couldn't have a programme of full renationalisation under European Union.
Yeah, and I don't think you can. So certainly the railways could not be taken into public ownership, or they can only be taken temporarily into public ownership under the fourth railway package. And those packages are going to be brought to all public services. And things like the free movement of labour, which many people appreciate, and I'm not against people moving to get a job, but it also means that you have to inherit the terms and conditions that are brought. So you had what was called the Viking Laval case, where Lithuanian workers were posted into Scandinavia and they brought Lithuanian wages, which obviously undermines the local market. So there are problems about the free movement of labour and capital that undermine collective agreements.
And we're not going to get into a half-an-hour ding-dong about this.
No.
But you're cherry-picking again. I mean, there are plenty of...
Well, everyone does that.
But some people think you're a refreshing change, Mick Lynch. You can't use the everybody does it defence.
No, but
you can't seriously look at what's happened since 2016 and not regret, in part...
I do regret that there is a Conservative government bringing...
What were you expecting?
Well, we were asked in principle, weren't we?
Yes.
Do you approve of the European Union and do you want to remain a member of it? My position is the traditional left position, going back to Peter Shaw and Michael Foot.
Lexit.
Lexit, if we want to call it that. If we'd had the European Community, the EEC, I would have voted to stay in the EEC. I don't personally, and many people in my union, don't believe that Europe should be a sovereign country. I don't believe in a European army, which will come.
No, it won't.
I don't believe... Well, but let's see. I don't believe...
What's wrong with armies that we're in? There's armies that we're not in that we're supposed to be worried about historically.
Possibly. I don't believe that we should give up much of our fiscal policy to a European state. I was in Ireland at the weekend seeing family, and mortgages are going up in Ireland because of the decisions of the European Central Bank in France.
We've got the highest inflation in the G7.
Yes, we have.
Largely because of Brexit. Even the Wall Street Journal, which leans to the right, says so.
Well, I saw an economist say it's 50% to do with the oil and gas.
All right, and 48% to do with Brexit.
Well, possibly, and that's a consequence. But
would you go back in if they gave us the option?
We can consider having a relationship with Europe on a better basis than we're going to get, certainly. And if it was the EEC, I would certainly support it.
I should go back to Colin, because I've got on my hobby horse now. Colin, are you satisfied with that answer?
No, not particularly, because I did hear...
Okay, that's fair enough.
Sorry, Mick.
I accept that. Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. Mick Truss, Liz Truss and Richie Sunak both said they want to scrap every single piece of EU legislation that's on the books. So...
Yeah, but our employment laws don't sit in EU legislation. So the anti-trade union laws that stop us...
They provide the base, though. And they can go below the base now. You know this.
Yeah, but anti-union laws are not anything to do with the EU legislation. They come mainly.
It's not. He's not talking about the anti-union laws. He's talking about protections that are enshrined in law, which does reflect the EU. But they're promising to rip up everything that was inherited from the EU, which is going to make the situation for British workers immeasurably worse.
So we need to get rid of this government. And
get a better government. Or you shouldn't have voted to give them the power to do it, man.
Well, no, they would have the power to do it anyway, because the deal that they were. Let's not forget that Cameron was elected on a basis of renegotiating the relationship with Europe. So the only way they wouldn't have had the referendum was to get some of those freedoms anyway, which is what the Cameron was elected for.
Maybe. Back to Colin. Sorry, I said I was not going to eat your lunch, and I just did.
Aye, okay. Sorry, Mick. I'm in total disagreement about EU.
Yeah, that's part of democracy.
There's a golden rule in life. Never trust a Tory. And they are going to demolish every workers' right they can possibly think of, and ones that we even haven't.
And you waved it through.
I waved it as passing by, perhaps. We didn't believe in the EU. We never did. Some of us who have socialist leanings, socialist backgrounds. The priority for me is not to undo history, but to get a different government that's going to strengthen employees' rights. And if I look at what's happening in seafaring, we've had British ratings destroyed while we've been in the EU, and there's not one piece of EU legislation that would have brought back British seafarers.
How many French P&O workers were chucked out without notice by P&O?
But they were a few, but they were not under it's not covered by EU legislation. It's covered by the international.
A lot of Irish people telling me their mortgages haven't gone up.
Well, they will be going up because they're going to put the interest rates up.
Take some news and then we'll get back to the phones. I'm glad that we've lanced the Brexit boil. A lot of complaints when you came on Full Disclosure. Okay. But it's not. Full Disclosure is not about that, whereas the radio programme is. So there you go. Horses for courses.